In this lecture, we are going to see how we can replace those static data which we have created to a real data, something which we get from our backend and from our WebSocket. For that, you need to install first the Scoket IO library. If you remember, we used that in the backend. Now we are going to use it in the front end as well. So for that, I need to install a library, not Scoket IO, but it's called socket.io-client. So this is specifically for the client. So I will say here npm install socket.io-client. So it's going to be installed in my application, and then I will be able to open a WebSocket with the backend. So also we need to make sure that we are running the backend as we saw previously. So now the library got installed. Now I need as well to use it. So first of all, I need to import something which is called IO. So I will say here import IO. Be careful to not use the curved brackets. You have to use it like this. So I will say import IO from and then socket IO client. So in that way you can import it. But it's better to create or initialize the connection in the root of my application. The root of my application now is not the home, it's the app.tsx. So here we have the initialization of our app where we created the navigation container and the stack navigator. So here it's better to import Socket.io and initialize a connection. So to establish a connection with the backend, we first run the backend. Of course, I am running it already as we saw before. And then I will say here constant, and then I will define some variable or some constant. I call it a socket. And then I will use that library which I imported, which is called IO. And as a parameter of this IO, I need to use a string, which will be the title or the URL of the WebSocket. So when we initialized our URL, we were using something like port or localhost 3000 as we saw with Postman. Here you need to do it in this way, 127 and then 0.0.1. And then you will use like 3000 like this. And in that way, you are connected to the client or to the backend. On Android devices, the thing is different. So here I am using iOS simulator, but on Android, you need to use the IP of your device. How you can know the IP of your device? You just need to open the terminal and then you need to type ipconfig like this. And then you are going to get like all data of your IP. So I will say here ipconfig, for example, -a on Windows. But here I'm using Mac OS, so you need to execute that command on Windows if you are using Windows. But now I am using Mac. So if I am using the Android simulator and I want to know my IP, I use the command which is called ifconfig. So in that way you can know the IP of your device. So I will open the terminal to see it in full screen, which is better. So we have this terminal already, which is called Metro. So I will open a new terminal again. So we have here a new one, and I will say if config like this, and let me zoom. So we have multiple ports on this device. So there are like LAN or, for example, AP1, which are all the ports about this device. For me, I need to use the one which is related to the Wi-Fi or to the IP of this device. So the right one which I need to find is, for example, here EN0. So it's different from the device to device, but normally it's EN0. So for that, as you see here, I have an IP. And this is the IP where I am using this one. So this is the gateway and this is my IP on this device. So I can copy this IP and then I will go to my code and replace this 127.0.0.1 with that IP. Only if I am using Android simulator. So of course, we are going to change anyway this IP to the IP of our server, because here is the backend server. So this is just if you are working locally. Of course, after we deploy the backend to some server, we will use the IP of that server in our application. So this is the way how we can do the stuff like this on Android. But now I am using iOS, so you can for that keep this IP or this localhost IP we can call to work with the simulator from iOS. Okay, now I am going to save, and we have now the socket, but we didn't know if we are really connected to the backend or no. So for that, you can initialize your connection somehow by calling also events. If you remember, we were using events in the backend to know if we are connected or not. So I will go here to our application code and I will say, okay, this socket dot on. If you remember, we were using that as well. So I say if it's connect, it's a function where I have a callback. So on connect, then I will have second parameter as a callback where it will return for me the state, okay, the client or the socket is connected. So I will place here a console.log and I will say, okay, socket is connected like this. So we have like this command now. So I'm going to open the terminal again and check if we are connected or no. So let's reload our application. Okay, we are not getting any connect. This is because sometimes you need to reload your application. So sometimes you need to stop the application and run it again. So you can as well be able to use those new libraries. So I restarted here quickly my backend or my application, and we will try again now. So I will go here to my terminal and I will see, okay, socket is connected. So socket on, and I specify the event connect, and then I will console log. I will receive a callback if the socket is connected. So in that way, you can receive the right callback and you are ready then to use the socket. So let's save everything. And then we are going to send a message or receive the data from the socket. But if you remember, we were using for example, the data or our data which we created in the home screen. In the next lecture, we are going to see how we can replace those data and read them from the socket. For now, you just need to know how to use the Scoket IO client library and use the right IP. Of course, as I told you, you must know your local IP if you are using Android simulator, or you need to use this IP, which is 127.0.0.1, which is the local IP if you are using iOS or Apple phone simulator. So in that way, we are connected and we initialized our connection to the socket. Of course, using as well the port which we specify in the backend. Make sure that you are running the backend and restart your application after making or calling the library. For some people, it will work directly without restarting the application, but for the others, it can need some restart.